Are millennials doomed to mediocrity forever? Yes. Time to think like an investor. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Josh, and if you're new here, this channel is all about personal finance and investing and exploring this narrative like we're going to explore today, that all millennials are lazy and they're soft, and the millennials come back and complain. It's like,
well, you generation above us, you screwed us, you put us in a financial catastrophe, and now there's a global pandemic, and we have all this student debt, and we're never going to get out from under it. And
then this narrative kind of self-perpetuates, and we dig ourselves a hole because now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But anyways, all of this to be said, there is definitely a narrative going around, and you read data on it. I mean, maybe you don't read data on it, but in my line of work, we're constantly having this discussion. Are millennials ever gonna do better than their parents? Is this the first generation where they don't actually surpass the income or the lifestyle that their parents had? Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, sorry, as a tangent, is that, well, it's much easier to out-earn like an immigrant rail line worker than it is a doctor who's been practicing for 20 years. Our parents had much better careers than our grandparents did, and our grandparents had better careers than our great-grandparents did. So it makes sense that it's getting harder to out-earn our parents. But all of this narrative about how millennials are doomed and they're soft and all this sort of thing, it's almost like every generation thinks that about the new generation. I mean, our kids are gonna be softer and they're gonna have, a more privileged upbringing than we had, and this is just going to continue forever. But I actually have some data to dispel this, because I think this is a myth. I don't exactly think that millennials are worse off than their parents or can't out-earn them. And I even have some charts that I actually have from Nick Majuli at Ritholtz Wealth Management, who came out with this great data, and he actually went through the data sets with the Federal Reserve Economic Board of Data, or Economic Database, and he came out and produced these graphs showing, okay, if we overlay the different generations, the millennials and Gen X and the baby boomers and the silent generation, where do they fall on inflation adjusted net worth per capita? So what that means is we're taking into account general price rises over time. How are we doing on a net worth basis? Well, what we see is that this red line where the millennials are is actually right on pace to be with Gen X, and is almost just like reaching out to touch with where the baby boomers were at that age. So it's really showing that millennials are actually on pace, right? They're actually on pace to be right exactly where everyone else was at that age. Now, another thing we can look at is not just net worth, but income. And what we see is if we compare from like the late 1980s until now, whether you're in the bottom 50th percentile or your 75th percentile or your 90th percentile, it doesn't matter where you fall, you are earning more on an inflation adjusted basis now than you were in the late 80s. Obviously, there was a massive slump in 2008, and that's where a lot of these arguments come from. The millennials graduated into an economic environment that was just completely toast. But all that being said, it's not exactly true. It's actually more true that millennials might, on an inflation adjusted basis, be doing better. So why do these narratives perpetuate? Why do they just continue onwards? Well, the reality is that although millennials have a lot more money, and although it looks like they have more financial assets and they're making more, they have a lot more debt, and it's mostly because of student debt. And just like the problem we've all encountered since we were 6 years old, school sucks, it ruins everything, and now we're all shackled with debt like a barbell on our back that we carry around everywhere. And millennials not only we might be earning more money, but a lot more of that money is going towards paying student debt. So I would say that you gotta look yourself in the mirror and realize, okay, was it a good idea for me to go and spend $250,000 on that psych degree? Maybe that wasn't the best idea. Hey, that's a hard pill to swallow. But it's a hard pill to swallow when you realize maybe not everything is the world's fault. Maybe you gotta look in the mirror every now and then. But all that being said, not only do I think this myth is a little over perpetuated, I also would take the other side of the agreement and say this next generation, Gen Z, who is anybody born after 1995, I believe, they are going to be the wealthiest, most prosperous, and they will have the best standard of living of any generation ever. That's my hot take, and I want to explain why that is. All wealth and changes in lifestyle, let's say our lifestyle is getting better, our standard of living is getting better, All of these things come from leverage, okay? And what is leverage? We've heard about it in physics. It's like if you have a little stick and there's a fulcrum towards one end, you can push a lot of weight using a lever if you have a fulcrum, right? That's the idea of leverage. If we can put in less energy to create more of an outcome or more output, we have leverage. If we're just putting in 1 ounce of energy and getting 1 ounce out on the other end, that's not a lot of leverage. It's kind of a one-to-one relationship. And what we've seen over the past 50 years especially, and especially since the internet age, is the explosion in the ability to use leverage. For instance, I love the example of Bill Gates at Microsoft and also the conspiracy theorist responsible for microchipping us with COVID-19 vaccines. That's not gonna fly ever. Oh, you're a moron. What am I talking about?
Windows.
Bill Gates has maybe one of the best examples of leverage in modern history, which is that you can build a piece of software once. You can build the Windows operating system one time, and you can sell it 1,000,000 times. That's leverage. You put in the work once, and you get 1,000,000 different levels of output for that. That's huge, right? That is massive. You could consider like a YouTube video like this kind of leverage, because I'm gonna put the effort into making this once, and maybe 1,000 people might watch it, or maybe 2,000 people might watch it while this video is online for its entire duration. Now, if you're not exactly sure where I'm going with this is how living standards increase over time. I mean, we get more leverage. Thousands of years ago, we were like tilling fields by hand with like a rock and a stone and trying to learn agriculture. Now we have like these massive machines that are automated that like run around on different farmland and like produce our food on demand, okay? It's not as articulate as I could have made it, but that's the general idea. As technology gets better, we can use less input to create more output. And I think that Gen Z is being born into a generation where they have, from the day they were born, been exposed to something called permissionless leverage. And what this means is, I mean, let's break the two words down. There's permissionless. We've talked about leverage a ton. Permissionless just means we no longer have to ask for it. For instance, if I want to start a store, back in the day, in our grandparents' era, they would have had to get a storefront, they would have had to find someone to lease space from, they would have had to create some form of product or good on a manufacturing line. Now, you go to Shopify.com, you open an e-commerce store, and boom, you're in business. Now, before, we would have had to do some marketing to get people to our business if we were in the 1950s. Now, we have social media platforms with thousands of followers, and we can broadcast our message everywhere. In addition to that, when it comes to delivering products, we have this global supply chain infrastructure where we can ship things across the world. We can ship things to people in different countries. These are things that our grandparents never had, and we don't even have to ask permission to use them. I can go to Squarespace and start a blog and start making money from ads. I can create my own media business like Joe Rogan has just by using YouTube. Gen Z has grown up and they have seen that people are making a living on Twitch. People have YouTube channels where they make a living. I have clients who say,
Josh, I need you to talk to my kid. I'm asking them what they want to do for a living. They're 12 years old and they say they want to be a YouTuber. I can't have that.
And I'm like, you know what? Your kid's onto something. Maybe they should start doing YouTube and maybe you should reconsider your idea. But all this being said, I want to share some insane stats. Since the year 2000, 50 million people consider themselves creators, okay? And a few million of those, 3 million, are making enough money online from a creative endeavor like YouTube or Twitch or something like that for it to be their full-time income. That was never possible before, and usually you would have to go to university, get a degree, take your training, do an internship, make your way up the corporate hierarchy, whereas now, all of this leverage, being able to use social media, being able to start an online store, being able to become a creator, these are things you don't have to ask permission to do, and you can do them on the side. For instance, this stat blew my mind. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I had to like reread it over and over. 60 million Americans are freelancers. Does that make any sense? Now, here's the crazy thing. 20% of baby boomers are freelancers. 50% of Gen Z consider themselves freelancers. Gen Z in the workforce, half of them consider themselves freelancers. What this means is we're kind of decentralizing the workplace. We're no longer using these corporate hierarchical structures. What we're doing is we're going out on our own without permission to find leverage in places where we can start an online business or create a following on social media and leverage that to create a new source of income where we no longer are at the whim of a boss or somebody else to tell us how much we can make. Now, that just massively diversifies the different ways that young people can make money. But in addition to that, the way they can invest it is getting easier and easier. For our grandparents or our parents, to get invested in the stock market, they had to like walk to the local brokerage, walk in there and place an order in person. Kids these days are buying cryptocurrencies and buying stocks on Webull, or they're buying it on Robinhood within seconds, and they don't even really have to do all that much to get an account set up. So all this being said, there's this famous quote, it's so cheesy, it's so cliche, it's like we stand on shoulders of giants. It's like there's something that we do in life, but it's not really attributable to us because there's hundreds of generations before us that have made it even easier to do what it is that we do. And with the dawn of the internet era and how much leverage is available to young people, a sign that my clients' kids want to be YouTubers shows me that there is some massive potential for this generation coming up to be the wealthiest generation that we've ever seen. So I think the millennials as lazy, the Gen Zs as being out of touch, these are completely overblown, and I actually think the opposite is going to happen. I think Gen Z might be the most prosperous generation yet. So all in all, I think that instead of viewing ourselves as some beneficiary of a broken system where we've been screwed by the man and we're being kept down, I think it's probably a decent idea for us to look at the opportunities that have been given to us and start to utilize these forms of permissionless leverage that can allow us to escape the 9-to-5, to be our own boss, to make as much money as we need to have a meaningful and fulfilled life. So anyways, guys, I hope this rant today helped you learn something, maybe provide a new perspective. If it did, or if you liked this video whatsoever, make sure to hit that like button below. If you want to follow along, hit subscribe as well, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.